Welcome to the Indomitable Podcast. I'm your host, Di Cerullo, and today we have another great episode that will leave you inspired. Because October is Queer History Month, we're bringing back a show favorite. Today's guest is prolific author and queer historian Lee Wind. Lee Wind's superpowers are stories, true and fictional, that center marginalized kids and teens and celebrate their power to change the world. Closeted until his 20s, Lee writes the books that would have changed his life as a young gay kid. And just as an aside, I know they would have changed mine. So some of Lee's most popular books, No Way They Were Gay, Hidden Lives and Secret Loves, A Different Kind of Brave, and some of his most recent titles, Love of the Half-Eaten Peach and The Gender Binary is a Big Lie, are bestsellers in the queer history category. And he is back again to share more potentially startling queer history with us. Hello, Lee. I'm so grateful to have you back.
Hi, Di. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. So first of all, I want to talk to you about your shirt. What does it say? What's it for? And everything.
Okay, so for those that can't see my shirt, it says strong like a reader, and the O in strong is like a do not enter sign, a red and white do not enter sign, and the white bar in the center of the do not enter sign is opening up, revealing it that it is a book being read. So this is part of a program called We Are Stronger Than Censorship. Actually, I'll turn around because the back of my t-shirt has that.
Yes.
And this is a project that I cooked up with Taslin Magnuson. So book banning has gotten really out of control in the US. And Taslin is one of the people that gathers the information, gathers all the data about book bans. She also she does work with two organizations, PEN America and Every Library Institute. Through PEN America, Taslin hosts these sort of like support sessions for authors who are experiencing their books being challenged or banned. And No Way They Were Gay, which is one of my books, has been on a couple of those lists, like 5 of them at this point.
Wow.
So that's how I met Taslin. And about 6 months ago, in the spring of 2024, we started a dialogue, Taslin and I, about it feels like we're really on the defense about book bans.
Yes.
And as we record this is actually Banned Books Week. But this is an issue that goes beyond the last week of September. This is an issue that is really ongoing. Washington Post did an analysis, and they found that of all the book bans that happened between 2021 and 2022, 60% of those bans were 11 people challenging hundreds and hundreds of books. So that was really revealing. And it also let us know that the other side, the people that want to hide, the people that want to basically only have books that celebrate whiteness and patriarchy, those people are very organized. And on the side of the freedom to read, we are kind of running around in panic. We're like, oh my gosh, I hope they stop. Oh, it's so overwhelming.
Right.
And so I said to Taslin, I would love to be part of coming up with how do we go on offense about book bans?
Yes.
How is it not just defense? So what does offense look like? And so we kind of had a lot of discussions over a period of about 3 months, and we came up with this idea. For every book challenge or ban in the month of September, we're counting them because Taslin counts them anyway.
Right.
For every book challenge, we're going to have 2 books that get purchased and donated. And the idea is that, there was this one person in Wisconsin who challenged 400 books in a school library, which resulted in all 400 books being taken off the shelves for 4 months while they reviewed all the books. And then at the end of those 4 months, most of the books were put back on the shelves. But if you remember elementary school, that's practically an entire semester.
That sure is.
That all those kids lost access to all those books for that period of time. This is very problematic. But if that person knew that by their challenging 400 books, 800 books were going to get purchased and distributed, it might slow their roll a little bit. So that's part of the idea. The other thing that I think people misunderstand about book bans is that there's this idea that when I've told friends that my book has been challenged or something, they'll be like, oh, congratulations, you're going to sell a lot more books. It's
Right.
not actually what happened. I mean,
It's not.
it's true if you're like the top 10.
Yes.
If your book is in the top 10 most banned, you get a lot of attention. You sell a lot of books.
Yes.
But basically, the point of the book bans is what we are calling the chilling effect. And that is when a librarian or a teacher is afraid to bring in a book that features Black characters or Black history or queer characters or queer history, or basically any book of that has diverse elements, because they're afraid of the backlash. And that is actually the point of the book bans. They want to, right, like roll it back. So the only books are those books celebrating whiteness and celebrating patriarchy. So to push back on that, like, first of all, we have to let people understand that that's the point of the challenges.
Yes.
That's the point of the book bans, is to, basically make it hard for kids to see any reflection of themselves. And this is really about public access, because if a family has enough money to buy the books online, it isn't really impacting them in the same way as it's impacting the families that really rely on public libraries, school libraries, the classroom libraries, collections of books. They're relying on those to have access. And so this is really disproportionately impacting the young people in the families that are already under-resourced and under-respected and undervalued.
Correct.
This isn't just about me. This is about us as a community, and we have to band together. And one more thing, the chilling effect is impacting independent publishers much more than it is impacting the big corporations who are publishing.
That's right.
Because the big corporations are also selling Bibles. They're also selling the big political conservative books. It's a very different financial impact.
That's right.
So we wanted to highlight the fact that independent publishers are driving a lot of diversity in books. And we wanted to help them, because we're also hearing from certain independent publishers like Levine Querido that their sales to schools and libraries are down 50%.
Yes.
Now, for a gigantic corporate conglomerate, right, an international conglomerate, that's maybe not such a big deal. But for a small company that's been around for 4 years, even though they have tons of award-winning books, that's really impactful. Half of their sales to schools and libraries have disappeared. So we want to help, we want to empower those independent publishers. We also want to empower the authors that work and the creators that work on those books. So we basically are working, the idea is that we're going to have 20 independent publishers. We're going to have one book from each of those publishers, and $8 will, an $8 donation pays for one book. So we're actually asking for people to donate in $16 increments, because that is 2 books to offset 1 book challenge. So my t-shirt, you can get swag, that it's very cool, that's strong like a reader, but also we have strong like a teacher, strong like a writer, strong like an author, strong like an illustrator, strong like a translator, strong like a bookseller, strong like a librarian. We have like a ton of different kinds, but every shirt or sweatshirt or whatever includes a $16 donation to purchase 2 books to offset 1 book challenge. So that's the idea behind the program. And I wanted to wear the shirt because I'm very excited, because it feels like we're doing something positive and good. And if people can't afford, to buy a t-shirt or to donate $16, that's totally cool. But check out the books. We have 12 books so far from 12 really amazing independent publishers. And, get them from the library or request them from their library. And if your library can't do it, then, check out your local bookstore. We're working with a lot of national and a lot of national partners to distribute the books, but also to help boost the message. So like Florida, Texas, and Wisconsin all have Freedom to Read projects. So all 3 of those are partners that are going to help us distribute books. Also, We Need Diverse Books is going to help us. Also, GLSEN has a Rainbow Library that is going to help distribute some of the queer-themed books. So I'm really excited. And the idea behind creating a collection of these 20 books from 20 independent publishers is that we're going to buy, the goal is to get 2,000 books, because we expect there to be about 1,000 challenges in September. So we want to donate 2,000 books. But, hey, this is a program, right? Like Banned Books is not just happening this 1 week of September. It's a year-round thing.
Yes.
So we're running this September 1st all the way through August 30th, 31st. I have to do the little rhyme to remember. How many days has August? 31. It is
31.
31.
You're right. There you go. I had
I
to get
just
all
did
the
the
way through
rhyme
the
in my
song.
head.
Yeah.
Exactly. Um, so we'll run it the whole year, and my hope is that maybe we can do even more than 2,000. What if we could do it for the entire year?
Yes.
Penn was doing the math, and it's actually been so many book bans that they basically are saying it's 10,000 and counting, because they're still counting.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a kind of, and it's a cool thing because my day job, so I write books for kids and teens, and we're going to talk about a couple of my books, but writing books for kids and teens doesn't necessarily pay the bills. So I need a day job. So I'm very, very lucky. I have a cool day job for a nonprofit called the Independent Book Publishers Association. And when I came up with this idea, I talked to the team that I work with, and they agreed that it could be an IBPA program. So we teamed up with Every Library Institute. So we're a nonprofit, but we're like a 501c6. Sorry,
Right.
not to get into weird tax
No.
designations, but like we're a trade association, and we needed to work with a 501c3.
Yeah.
So when people donate $16, it's a tax deduction for them. So Every Library Institute, decided to partner with us, and so that's pretty cool. And they built our website, and it's
Awesome.
wearestronger-than-censorship.org. So check it out, buy some swag. You can sign up. Also, this is cool. We're going to do weekly shopping lists of recently banned books.
I love that.
So
That's so
we're going to run a little
cool.
bit. We're going to run about 2 months behind the actual banning, just because gathering the information is not centralized. It takes a lot of time.
Right.
But we're pretty excited about that, because then that's not just these 20 books, it's any book that gets listed on a list or,
Yes.
pulled from a shelf. So thank you. That is the story of my t-shirt.
That's amazing. I'm glad I asked. Let's get to breaking down the pieces of that. Okay. First of all, I love the idea of the fighting proactively. That's always been sort of my beef as well, because I mean, I work in sort of the DEI community, and of course, as you know, in this day and age, DEI is practically a cuss word. Us as a community, I think, probably back maybe 2 years ago, we're feeling like we were running to catch up, right? We were constantly running to keep up with what was being said and what was being disseminated. And then meanwhile, it seemed like there was sort of a lockstep to sort of start dismantling the community, to start sort of maligning the community, and all using the same sort of catchphrases and the saying the community down, and misrepresentation of facts and and it got so far so fast that when we started to look at why, it had turned out that there were like think tanks that were passing down that information to their followers. And at first I was like, come on, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But then I saw like the actual packet, and I was like, oh my God, they're actually like, this is actually happening. They're actually doing this. And the exact same thing is happening within our community, within our book community, with trying to ban and challenge books. And it is absolutely the same thing. It is absolutely that just one person usually that's, submitting all the challenges. Usually it's not a person from the community. It's not a person with children. It's a person that just, got it in their head that this was going to be their life project. And they're doing so much harm and speaking for people who actually have children. So I guess my question,
and they haven't read the books.
they haven't read the books. They've never heard of the book.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too. Anytime I get feedback in our community about, oh, well, this book, I mean, for example, there was a book, Pink is for Boys, right? You open the book, like it had been passed around the mom community that someone was going to try to challenge this book right here in Massachusetts. And we were all like, the heck they are. So we popped it open and I read it aloud to a group of moms. And it's like, pink is for boys, and and describing other things that are pink. And you go through it and you're like, are you kidding me? Like you looked at the cover, you didn't read it at all, you put forth that challenge, and you impacted everybody else's education in public schools in Massachusetts. And that's incredible to me, because I know if that's what we are dealing with, everybody that's less Massachusetts than us has got it worse, right? Like feel that, I mean, I know how I feel as a parent, as a writer, as a person who works with library. It's so disheartening to me that these projects are taken on disingenuously. Do you know what I mean? It's not even like we're saying we're protecting the kids. We're pretending that it's these things, but reality, we're trying to wipe out the history of people who have existed here for all of time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, with your example, which is so fraught and amazing, right? Like
Yes.
because I mean, pink actually was the color for boys 106 years ago. Like we
5 minutes
talked
ago,
about that in the last
exactly.
episode,
Yes,
right? Like
right.
that in the baby catalog that they
Yes,
said that pink was a stronger, more decided color, and
right.
blue, which is daintier, is more appropriate for girls. That was
Yes,
106 years ago here in the U.S.
yes,
So but the thing for that parent, or for that person that doesn't like that book,
right,
it is okay to not like a book. Not every book is for everyone. And
right.
if you as a parent feel that you're uncomfortable with your child reading that book, that pink is for boys, because you're so insecure in your own masculinity that you don't want your child to think about, possibly wearing pink at some point as a boy, that is okay. No one is
Yes,
forcing you to read Pink is for Boys. Um, it is not okay for you to want to remove access to that book for every
for
other child.
everybody. Right,
Like
right.
that's what's weird. And
Yeah.
and and this is ostensibly happening from people who are like parental rights, which is bullshit language, right? Like
Yes,
you have the right already as a parent to not have your child read or be exposed to the things you don't want your child to read or be exposed to. You already
absolutely.
have that right. What you are arguing for is the right for you to take away the choice from everyone else's
Absolutely.
family.
I would,
That's what gets me mad.
I mean, same. Like, if you think about, I can't stand the idea of moms for liberty. Excuse me for saying. As a mom, it is I feel very one kind of way about somebody calling themselves the Liberty Party while trying to silence my individual parenting of my individual children. And far and away, all these other moms and all these other, like, you don't speak for us, how dare you? And what was so incredible to me is a lot of them don't have children.
That's why it's so important for us to talk about it and
it
to let people know, and
it
for people
truly
to
is.
kind of like go beyond the cover and be like, oh, well, what is this actually about? So the scary thing is that you read something like Project 2025,
Yes,
and they are basically they're using a manipulation of language to say that
yes,
any queerness
yes,
is porn.
right.
And if they can call two, so Marla Frazee has a beautiful book that she illustrated called Everywhere Babies.
Mm-hmm.
And in it, there's a street scene with lots of different families. And then there are two men, one with an arm around the other, walking down the street.
Right.
They're fully clothed. It's just a normal street scene.
Yes.
But that book has been called sexually explicit because it includes one man with his arm around another. Oh, and there's one more scene where it's like it's a spread with like 4 or 6 different like exhausted parents with their babies,
Yeah.
and one is two mom, like what you could interpret as a two mom family, kind of like exhausted in bed, and one of them is like pushing the bassinet for the
Right.
kid to fall
Relatable.
asleep. Yeah, totally relatable. We've all been there. And I think that calling that book sexually explicit because it includes depictions of couples that could be interpreted as queer,
Right.
calling that porn
Right.
is how they intend to criminalize librarians.
Right.
They've threatened to basically put librarians on like
Yes.
sex offender watch
Yes.
lists and
I
stuff.
read that.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and like they're seriously messed up because it's sort of like we're not going to go back into the closet, and that's what they're trying to create, this really unsafe atmosphere. And I feel like that's really terrible
Of course.
because we see the numbers of the young people who are ideating self-harm, that
Yes.
there are really
Yes.
it's really through the roof. It's getting
Yes.
just like the book bans are out of control.
Yes.
That's rising because they feel less safe,
They feel less
and
safe. Less
and
accepted, less welcome, less human, as we have these dehumanizing conversations about them. Yes.
And so nobody's trying to take away in schools they're trying to limit cell phone use, but they're not arguing to take away smartphones or the
Right.
internet from children, right? So it's
Right.
not like it's not like young people are not going to know queer people exist.
Right.
They're not going to know sometimes men fall in love with other men, or sometimes women fall in love with other women, or sometimes people don't identify as men or women. Like, it's not like they're going to not know that exists.
Right.
But by taking away books are sort of empathy machines.
Yes.
So the idea of taking away books is very intentional. They want to take away empathy.
Right.
They don't want people to appreciate the shared humanity we have. And that's why they're attacking books, because books really are a great way to feel empathy with someone that on the surface may seem really different, but like at their heart are so similar. I mean, like, how many straight romances have I read, right? Or had to watch on TV.
Right? Oh my God.
Yeah, it didn't make me straight. I mean, I think that, straight people can read a gay romance and not turn gay. Like, it's not, if it worked the other way.
It's like that thing that we always say: we do not want to turn your kids queer. We want your queer kids to live, right? Like, we are not we're not the ones making queer babies, right? Like, just here to make sure that there's a community here to receive them when they come looking for safe adults. And here's the thing, friends. If 10% of the world population, right? And check my math, right? If 10% of the world population is queer in some way, then that's true regardless. That there's no shaming that out of people. There's no harming that out of people. They will be who they are. And if you have raised them with shame, they will find predators when they go looking for community instead of family. Queer people make family with each other. And you can either have your kid be healthy and seeking healthy relationships because they're okay with their identity, or they can be out there seeking predators and self-harming. Realistically, you can't change anything else about them except how they are in the world based on their psychological safety. So, I mean, as a parent, to me, this is strikingly bad parenting, is in my mom opinion, if you will.
Right. Well, in my dad opinion, I feel like it's very similar. Like, wanting your kid not to know how people get pregnant is a great way to end up with a pregnant teenager.
It's a great way to end up with a pregnant teenager. 100%. The statistics bear that out every single time. Taking, any of that education out of the schools in health class where it used to be, let's be real, friends, it was in health class, calm down. And not having that and removing it because we're feeling some kind of way about it did nothing but increased teenage pregnancy numbers. Like,
yeah, and we see it in so many realms.
Like, yes.
My friend Ellen Hopkins is a brilliant New York Times bestselling author, but also her books have been very banned, and she's been disinvited from speaking and stuff.
Yes.
But Ellen's books are not a celebration of Crank is probably her most famous book, the big breakout book, and it's loosely fictionalized about her own daughter's experience getting into drugs, and really terrible things happen. This is not a celebration of using drugs. This is like, if anything, it is a warning, flashing neon, do not use drugs kind of book. And yet it is banned because these people don't read the book, and they're just like, oh, I don't want my kid to know drugs exist. Well, I'm sorry, but that is not a good strategy for keeping your child safe.
No. Yeah. My kids have already had the drug talk. They are 9 and 7. Y'all.
Yeah.
I mean,
you don't have to be in a major metropolitan city for drugs to exist. So if you want to protect your child, you give them the information.
Well, not only just that, kids talk. Right? Kids have the context for living alongside everybody else's kids, right? If my kid hears from somebody else, like, I will give you a perfect example. We were having a conversation. I said to a little girl, hey, how's your mom? Because I say that, right? I'm like, I thought normal people say, hey, how's your mom? But anyway, I said, hey, how's your mom? And she said she's living in a motel because she does too many drugs. Now, kids perceive things very simplistically. They do not attach shame to those things. So when they say them to my children, my kids are ready, to have, just to be supportive rather than, reject that person who's trying to just talk about what they're going through, you know? So like the idea that this isn't real, that the longer that you push it away, the longer you can keep it from your kids is absolutely asinine. And it makes us all worse as a community. But if we can have age appropriate conversations about the realities of being in a community, at the realities of being in life, kids get that. Kids are totally like, they're a lot more resilient than you think about these conversations. Like,
I also wanted to chime in and say that you used a number that we've been hearing a lot, this 10%.
yes.
And it's really our generation, well, your generation and my generation above it. Like we've been hearing this 10% number a lot for queerness, but actually there's some new research that we're hearing about the youngest generation now, who are now teenagers, who the numbers I heard was like 40% are identifying as queer.
That's amazing. Good for them. I'm glad they're skipping over all the nonsense, all the, you know, all the compet, all the, good for them. Good for you, Gen Z.
And one study in terms of gender was that I cite in The Gender Binary is a Big Lie, is that 1 out of 11 high schoolers is identifying outside the gender binary.
Good.
So as trans or gender queer or some other gender diverse identity.
Mm-hmm.
And the pushback that these kids are getting is that, whoa, you're doing something new, or oh, this is trendy, or oh, this is the first time this has happened. It's not true at all.
Right.
The reason that I called the book The Gender Binary is a Big Lie is because it's not to say that the categories of men and women don't exist. They do.
Yes.
But that is not the only two ways to be a human being.
Yes.
And that's true now.
Yes.
Because there's many cultures around our world and societies where they slice gender differently than we do in the West. And then there's also historically so many examples of other ways of thinking about gender. Mm-hmm. And there are so many people that live outside the gender binary, not just now, but throughout history. So that's what I was really excited to get into, because I mean, the first book was about like this false facade of history that I was taught was that, you know, the only important people in history were rich, white, straight, cis, hetero men from Europe, or their descendants. And that felt like I wanted to pull that down, and let's talk about like all those amazing people from history who were men who loved men, or women who loved women, or people who loved without regard to gender, or people who lived outside the gender binary. And then I wanted to really get into this other big lie in this book, the second book of the series, which is to really look at like, how do we get so messed up about gender? Like, and what are some of these examples of cultures that, you know, celebrated people who did not identify as men or women? So like in Hawaii, my family went on vacation to Hawaii, and in Honolulu, there are these stones that are just off the Waikiki beach. They are to honor these 4 healers that came from Tahiti, like a really long time ago. Like, I can't remember the exact date, but it was a long time ago, like 1,000 years ago, more.
Yes.
And there's a whole plaque, and it's all about like reclaiming Hawaiian heritage. But what they don't say is that those 4 healers were mahu. And that is the Hawaiian term for people that sort of were a third gender. Yeah. And you know, that was really amazing to discover, but also kind of sad, right? Like it's still being hidden. Even as they're reclaiming it on the one hand, they're hiding it on the other. And there's there's a great documentary, and there's a beautiful children's picture book called Kapamahu, which is about one of those healers and how they became so famous. And there was like thousands of people can move these giant these boulders as monuments. And then, of course, colonization, when they built a bowling alley in the 1950s, they used the stones as part of the foundation of the bowling alley. So horrible. And then they reclaimed them, and now they're actually on display, but still the display says nothing about it being sort of this gender diverse, amazing thing. There are so many examples. And so I wanted to kind of look at some of those examples and just help readers, you know, the books are for basically ages 11 and up, help readers kind of understand that like this, like this idea that we have about gender, that there's only two categories, is completely not true. And it's like the big metaphor I use in the book is that of a rainbow. Like when you look up in the sky and you see a rainbow, we think we've been taught that there are seven colors in a rainbow because that's the Roy G. Biv, right? Like that's what we've been taught. But other cultures at other times interpreted different amounts of colors in the rainbow. And so, it's sort of like we've been trained. But if you look at a rainbow, there are no coloring book lines saying that they're just seven colors. There are hundreds of thousands of colors in a rainbow, but we've sort of been trained to only perceive the seven. So gender is very similar, I think. Like there are really, like the subtitle of the book is Infinite Identities Around the World. And it opens with a quote by Alok Vaid-Menon, who is saying that there are as many genders as there are people in the world. And I love that. I think that's very profound. I mean, certainly we have categories of gender. A great example is the Bugis people of Southern Sulawesi in Indonesia. They have three sexes and five genders. So people can have male bodies, people can have female bodies, people can have intersex bodies. And then they have five genders. So they have like men, they have women, they have Kalabai, Kalalai, and Bisu. So Kalabai are people with male bodies that embody a female gender identity. Kalalai, it's people with female bodies who embody a male gender identity. And then Bisu are sort of a transcendent gender, sort of spirit mediums, and they either embody all genders or no genders. And they're sort of seen as sort of priests, and they have a more special connection to gender. And then also gender is really fascinating. There's so many cool metaphors for gender. Is gender a journey? We know gender is not two boxes. So then how do we think about gender? Is it like a stable state, like a glass of water on a table that if you bump it, it jostles around, but then it settles down? If you put more water in, it'll jostle around and then it'll settle down. So like that's one theory about gender. There are so many. So I share like 8 or 10 of the coolest theories about gender. And then also intersex was really fascinating for me. When I was doing the research on the first book on No Way They Were Gay, I was really shocked to learn that being intersex is as common as people having red hair. And I wanted to get more into that. And so right now in our culture, unfortunately, still, there is a struggle happening where intersex people are trying to advocate for babies that are being born with intersex traits, not having surgeries happen to those children, who of course cannot consent. They are babies. So to hold off on unnecessary cosmetic surgeries until those children decide whether they want to have surgery or not. But the standard of practice from the 1950s has been to operate on babies to make them appear either male or female. And this has really messed up a lot of intersex people. And they really view it as a violation of their human rights, which I 100% believe it is a violation of their human rights. So, and then, so that was really fascinating to me. And the fact that actually it was based on like really, really flawed, ego-driven medical, I would call it research, but that seems like overstating it. It was,
yes.
Yeah. So there's a whole chapter about intersex activism, because I just felt like that is really part of this conversation, because they're kind of two lies we have to unpack, right? Like, and dismantle. One is that there are only two kinds of bodies. Absolutely false. Right. And it's interesting because even the study, remember I mentioned the study about like 1 in 11 young people are identifying as genderqueer. Even in that study, they only asked whether kids were assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth. They didn't even include the option of being born intersex in a study about gender diversity. I thought that was so revealing.
Yes.
And then, so there's that lie, right? There's the lie about our bodies. And then there's the lie about sort of the social roles we serve in our culture, which is, I think, a good definition of what gender is. So for me, that's, and that there are only two options, right? Like people with male bodies who grow up who are boys and grow up to be men, and people with female bodies who grow up, who are girls and grow up to be women. Like that is not, those are not the only two options.
That's not
and so
right.
I wanted to really get into that. And I learned a ton, because I didn't learn any of this in school.
No. So as we're having this conversation, all I can think about is how autistic and neurodivergent people intersect at the place where queerness exists at a rate of like 40%. And I am also having the conversation regularly with people that autism never existed before, ADHD never existed before. Do you know what I mean? So it's as we think about book bans, as we think about whose story gets to be told, whose story is considered pornographic, whose story is allowed to exist within the human consciousness, I'm remembering the fact that they are telling us that we just started existing too. So, here, because I'm always doing autism and ADHD content, this is another place where that identity intersects. So, again, super high intersection of neurodiversity and queerness. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we have started unpacking what these norms and these roles look like in our own individual lives, and thinking about whether or not we subscribe to them ourselves or whether we believe in them ourselves. And if you do not, you are very much a person that needs to be fighting against these book bans and fighting alongside people who are trying to be proactively against book bans and against people who are deciding whose lives matter, whose story matters, who can be who they are in the world that we are currently living in.
And I think that's a beautiful kind of like segue into the fact that, like, yes, these are all connected. All these denials of the history of queer people and the history of people existing with autism or, neurodiverse diversity, it's all connected to like the fact that like women didn't have important. No, women were really, really important in history.
Yes.
And like,
oh my God,
and people of color and disabled people. And once you see that it's all BS and that they're gaslighting us into thinking that we're the first, so we feel isolated and disempowered, when we can tap into our history, that's really exciting, because then you're like, oh, wow, really? Like, we had famous people in history, like that makes you feel like you deserve a place at the table today. And for young people in particular, it lets them think that like, wow, the future is limitless.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, is infinite. They could do anything.
They can
accomplish anything.
My generation had to, and yours too, I'm assuming, had to unlearn, compulsory heteronormativity. That was a thing we had to do. We had to throw off all of these other beliefs about ourselves. And that was something that we were seeing. And then in this day and age, they are just skipping right over that sandpit. And I am just so delighted, because I'm just thinking, how much farther can we get as a community if we don't have to make all the mistakes of the generation before us? And I think that that's what makes history and our existence within it so crucially important to have an awareness of, and to be able to tell other people when they're just casually dehumanizing an entire group of people that no, in fact, we were always here. Women have been here. Queer people have been here. People of color have been here. It's incredible to me that we need to have this in order to have an identity ourselves as Americans. I don't think that it's necessary.
It gets back to the fact that we all need to be allies to each other, right?
Yes.
That if we're all in it together, we actually outnumber the jerks.
Right, exactly. So, which is why we see so many different people coming in and trying to cause fights within our communities and cause, trans people, are they really part of the gay community? Yes. All of 100%. These people are our people. We fight for these people. Absolutely. No, thank you. Take that argument somewhere else. Do you know what I mean?
Because it's a strategy, right? It's a strategy, but like, if they can get us fighting among ourselves, then we're not going to actually make progress against patriarchy and white supremacy.
Yes. And you know what? Since you are the expert, how did the queer community become the queer community? Why aren't these factions still just factions? Why aren't we all a community today?
Well, I think that there are some people that I still have conversations with that are, usually gay or lesbian, white, privileged, older folks that don't see. They don't understand. They're like,
Hmm.
why do we have to, it was very
Yes.
Mattachine societies, right? So like
Yes.
in the 50s,
Yes.
for those listening, there was this idea that like if we could just be polite enough and, the men dress in suits, in a black suit with a white shirt and a black tie, and the
Hmm.
women wear nice, girly dresses,
Yes.
and we would get rights for white straight acting
Yes.
gays and lesbians first, and
Yes.
then maybe at some eventual point we'd get it for the other queer people of color, and
Yes.
but like if you actually look at history, like Stonewall, like it was the drag queens that were the trans women that
The
were like
people of
throwing the
color, trans, and drag queen. Yes.
yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
Marsha P. Johnson,
Marsha P.
and like
Johnson.
I just honest, I get it. They were well intentioned, but they were
Yes.
also maybe a little bit blinded by their privilege of
Yes.
being white and being able to pass.
And
And
being
I
able
think
to
that
pass. Passing is safety. Passing is safety. And we all know it. And we all raise our voice an octave or drop our voices an octave when we are in unsafe situations. And if you can't do that and make yourself more safe, then we need to be talking to you when it comes to what the issues in the community actually are.
absolutely, yeah. So I feel like eventually people are starting to understand it, and really credit to women, to lesbians who
Yes.
during the AIDS pandemic, when it was really gay men that were the first
Dying.
wave of deaths and
Yes.
illness, they stepped up, and
Yes.
I think that that was amazing and beautiful and heartbreaking,
Yes.
because of the need when the government didn't do anything.
And thought AIDS was a punishment. Let's just be clear. Ronald Reagan felt like he didn't need to talk about AIDS, which was called grit at that time. And he just felt like it was great that this was a punishment for gay men and queer people. This was going
Yeah,
through the community.
and in other countries, like in the continent
other
of Africa, it
yes.
was more women were dying, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, it was
Yes.
straight people that were dying, and
Straight women.
because we
Yep.
had dropped the ball, like
Yes.
it's so messed up.
It absolutely was.
But I still think that there's work to do within ourselves, right? Like
Yes.
within our community. I feel like bi people in particular feel really like they're being made invisible.
Yes.
Right. I won't speak for you, but like
No, please.
definitely I've talked with friends, and like if they are in a relationship that appears straight
Yes.
to other people,
yes.
they can feel like they have been made invisible, and suddenly
Absolutely.
They're no longer queer. But that's not
I
true. They
regularly
still
get
are
thanked
queer.
for my allyship. I have people. I'll be like, I have never been in the closet. I am, an ADHDer with autism who, just has always been who she is because I didn't know how to make anything fit into that box. So, I mean, anytime I dated men, I was straight, and I had outgrown it. And every time I dated a woman, I was looked at as a red flag in terms of relationship material because eventually she's going to go back to dating men, kind of looks down on you. And as a result, the suicide rate among bi people is the highest for all of us. It's absolutely incredible to me that we're still having these conversations and still witnessing bi erasure to this day. We still hear people having conversations that, bi people are anti-trans. When biness has always been out loud and proud about dating within the trans community for all of the existence. Bi people were some of the first people to say, please do not assume that there are only two genders. It's incredible to me that people will come to me, a bi person, having just found out about trans and non-binary people, and talk at my face about what that means, right? So, I mean, if you're not aware, bi does mean two. It means that you are attracted to genders the same as yourself and genders that are different from yourself, which already includes trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and gender fluid people. Different from me is already anything else that isn't me. So thank you for that moment of bi history.
No, I loved it. It's interesting too because there's a lot. I mean, pan is also a term that's used sometimes interchangeably and sometimes differently. And this is why it's so important to let people define their own labels or choose none at all. Yes. Right? Like we should not be imposing labels on other people.
I'm noticing that younger people coming into the community are saying pan just to be sure that everyone knows they mean to be inclusive of trans and non-binary
Right.
people.
That
And
when they
that's
say
fine for
bi,
me.
they don't mean they
That's
don't mean
right, exactly. So sometimes we'll
the
see
gender
people say
binary.
bi/pan, and that's great for me. What I don't like is people who need to be like, oh, well, I'm pan because you're bi, and I didn't think that you were anti-trans, Di. And I'm just like, this makes me want, like, the flames, you know? Like, I'm just like, really? Today, in 2024, in the age of TikTok, no one has ever explained this to you before. Thank you for that. You know, it's I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that we have all made community with each other, and I think it's so important, especially as we see more and more teenagers being thrown out of their homes for just being who they are. A lot of us need to be safe adults that are building that community for them to come into. So
yeah, and one safe adult can have a huge impact.
One
I mean,
safe
the
adult.
research is really clear. One safe adult, and you can be that safe adult if you're listening.
Yes.
One safe adult changes outcomes dramatically.
Exactly.
Di, before we run out of time, I want to talk about Love of the Half-Eaten Peach.
That's what I was just going to say. Let's talk about your books.
Okay, so we talked about the gender binary is a big lie, but when I was doing the research for No Way They Were Gay, I came upon this story. So 2,500 years ago, and I'm holding up the cover for those watching the video, 2,500 years ago, in the time of Confucius, sort of before China was unified, there were these two guys who loved each other, Wan, Duke Ling of Wei, and Mizizia. So as the true story goes, Zizia and Wan were walking through an orchard, and Zizia picks a ripe peach off of a tree and starts to eat it. It's so delicious, he stops halfway through and he offers the other half to the Duke. The Duke makes a really big deal about it. Like, oh, I don't know. We don't have exact dialogue, but like, right. I can't believe you would sacrifice your joy for me. Right. Anyway, something about that moment really captured the imagination of people at that time so much that for over 1,000 years, the way they said gay in Chinese was love of the half-eaten peach. And I just was like, I just thought that needed an epic retelling. Their children when the book starts, and Wan is going to be the future ruler of the state of Wei, and he's told that he needs to understand perfection if he's going to be a good ruler. But he doesn't understand because nothing is perfect. There's always something preventing a thing from being perfect. And the riddle really weighs on him. And so Zizia, as they're all throughout their teen years, they're trying to figure it out. And Zizia sets out on a grand quest to find something perfect. And I will just hold up one of the illustrations. This is kind of amazing. And, basically searching all over the land to find something perfect. And then, of course, finds a peach, and it looks perfect, and it smells perfect, and it appears perfect. But just as he's about to approach and get to Wan to offer him the peach, a thought stops him cold, and he's like, what if it tastes terrible? So he realizes he has to try it, right? Because we've all been there. We've all thought the peach was going to be delicious, and it was mealy, or it was gross, or, So he tries it, and it's incredible, and he eats like 3 bites, and each is more delicious than the last, and he finally rushes with it to the palace, finds Wan on a bridge in the garden, and rushes to him and says, I think I found it. I found you something perfect. And the whole court leans forward as Wan eats the rest of the peach. And finally, when only the pit remains, he says, yes, that was perfect. And there's this wise man and this wise woman character that have been there, and they actually pose the riddle in the first place. And they say, wait a minute. How could it be perfect if it was only part of the whole? And then the wise woman says, but if he hadn't tried it, how would he have known it was perfect in the first place? And Wan raises his hand for silence and goes, it was not the peach that was perfect. And Mizizia's face just crumbles. He's so upset. He thought he had done it. And then Wan says, it wasn't the peach that was perfect. It was the sharing of it.
Right.
And then they understand that love, which they realize they love each other, love is as close to perfection as we can achieve as human beings. And that's the story of Love of the Half-Eaten Peach.
That is so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm so happy. And she just did such an amazing, amazing job with the illustrations. I'll just hold up one more illustration. It's a little hard to see because it's sideways, but it's just, they're
So
so
beautiful.
beautiful. And the illustrator is Jieting Chen, who is Chinese American. And one of the lovely things about the book, since it's this sort of like love story from Chinese history and from queer history, is that the dedication page, I dedicated the book on behalf of being the author. I dedicated it to my husband, and Jie Ting dedicated it to her wife.
Oh,
So there's sort of like this
you precious
meta.
people.
I know it's like this meta love story on top of the actual love story.
On top of
It's really, really.
immortalizing
I
his
hope you
love
check it
story
out.
while immortalizing a love story. Stop it right now. Cutie pies. Oh, all right. Gosh, I want to I can't jump into the next thing I want to ask you about because that will be crazy, a crazy amount of time. So I have so many more things to say, but I want to let you get back to your real life. So I know you're going to send me all of these links where we can buy the shirts, buy the books, all of those sorts of things. Those will be in the show notes. How do people follow you and how do they support your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they're interested in the We Are Stronger Than Censorship project, it is literally typing out wearestrongerthancensorship.org in the URL. And my name is Lee, Lee, Wind, Wind, and you can just enter that into your URL. It's leewind.org, and that will link you to all of the goodness online.
I love that. I can't, oh my gosh. I'm, first of all, obviously getting a t-shirt, maybe 2 t-shirts. We will see. Y'all, thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the Indomitable podcast for more incredible stories of humaning. Remember, my new book, Indomitable, A Foster Care Story, is available wherever you get your books. Thank you so much to all of my Indomitable friends who met with me during the amazing Comfort Cases fundraiser. I am so grateful to see folks showing up and fighting for for foster kids like I was. If you have upcoming events you'd like me to bring the Indomitable experience to, please submit a request via my website. And finally, as ever, I am so happy to have you here in community with me. And remember, together we are truly indomitable. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.